What is it that you do? How would you describe it?
Ooh, very multi-layered question, but I am a musician of the body is what I like to call myself. And that came through a lot of meditation and really sitting with the work that I do. But a musician of the body is basically somatic therapy and nervous system work combined together. And I own a company called Fearless Femme Project. And Fearless Femme Project is the idea that we're not absent of fear, but we can face our fears head on. And the closer we go towards those, the closer we become to liberation and to just being a liberated woman is really what I stand for. So I facilitate retreats across the world. I facilitate plant medicine ceremonies, as well as a lot of online programs for women to get out of their heads and come back to their bodies.
Tell me a little bit about somatic therapy. What does that entail? And speak to me as if I know nothing about somatics.
Yeah, so somatics, basically, just to break it down, the soma is where we store our emotions, our trauma, our repressed experiences, memories, and we store it inside of the cells in the tissues from your throat down to your pelvic floor. And so it's the idea that the body keeps score. If you've ever heard of that book, the body is consistently taking in information, and it's placing it in the body if you don't have the tools to process it through to alchemize it into something different. So when we're looking at somatic processing is breath, sound, movement, and touch. And that allows you to process the repressed experiences, the emotions, the ways in which you viewed something that transpired in your life. And we shove it down into our body, and the body keeps score. And what that means is that the body is capable of storing it and causing dis-ease in the body. And when there's dis-ease or lack of ease, or you're out of homeostasis, there's dysfunction. And the dysfunction causes things like cancer, like memory decline, causes ailments, knee pain, back pain, hip pain, hormonal dysfunction, and beyond. And so when we can look at that, we can understand that the body is consistently and constantly always speaking a language. We just need to learn how to interpret the language that the body is speaking. So that's somatics, is getting into the body to access the wisdom that the body is holding and all that we have stored in order to transform your external worlds. So a lot of what happens is there's talk therapy, right? And that's only about 10% of your psyche. There's so much more that's happening underneath the surface. And so going into the body and figuring out what's there and what's being stored.
Where does the switch get flipped? Because if the body keeps the score and we instinctually, as individual, not even as individuals, as human beings, know how to process these traumatic experiences or process these repressed emotions that we don't allow ourselves to express, where does the switch get flipped where we stop allowing the body to process and we try and hold on to those emotions?
Yeah, good question. So think about, like, just to reframe before going into that question, dogs, when you see a dog, if you splash them with water, that could be like a little trauma to them, right? So they shake it off and they let it go, or you step on their toe and they go, ah, or they bark, they don't scream, maybe. Your dog becomes a human.
Yeah.
And so they shake and they let it go. And that's a lot of what we're instinctually supposed to be able to do, is to let it go. We're the only species that keeps the emotion and shoves it in. So where the flip gets switched, the switch gets flipped, is when your parent tells you to stop crying, to be quiet, when maybe a caretaker feels uncomfortable with their own emotions, so they never gave you the tools to be able to process them. It's that primal child throws the temper tantrum, and over time they're conditioned to stop crying, to go to your room, to sit down, and eventually over time those emotions become foreign. Because if you look at a child, even, they're so willing to throw a temper tantrum in the middle of the grocery store or to just let it go. And we just are in a society where it's like, suck it in, keep it together, be quiet. At least for me, growing up, I'll speak from my own experience. It was, get up, don't let them see that. There's a way we're supposed to present ourselves. Stop doing it that way. And when I look now at my parents, I'm like, oh, that's why I didn't know how to process my emotions, because they also didn't have the tools to be able to do so. So it became uncomfortable for them. Stop crying. You're a big girl. Stand up. And that's what happens.
It's a very, you bringing up a child being able to emote and have these tantrums sounds very theatrical, but is exactly how my childhood was as well. I was a very theatrical kid, hence going into theatrics. The interesting piece that I'd want to explore with that is, from a theatrical standpoint, a lot of my friends that are still in the arts are some of the ones that have the most repressed trauma of anyone that I know. And they use the arts as a cathartic way to release emotion because they haven't been able to install the tools needed to process as them individually. And that was something that I speak from my own experience too, was that I recognized in myself that I got into performance in order to play and express emotion as another person because it felt safe. But I wasn't able to express that emotion as myself.
Yes.
And as I grew up and continued to quote unquote do the work myself, I realized that I was actually using that as a defense mechanism rather than allowing myself to process as me.
As you.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting. I wonder so it's almost like you were dissociating from you and then becoming the character. And then the character was how you would process?
And then the character was processing emotion in the scene, but it gave me this cathartic release as if I was releasing the emotion, but it wasn't actually me.
But not ownership or responsibility for your own emotions.
Was removed.
Yeah.
And then when I came back to myself, I realized that in personal relationships, I wasn't able to connect deeply with someone because I wasn't able to express and emote as Kevin,
yes,
but I was as whatever character I was playing.
Oh, this is giving me an idea because I feel like, are you familiar with parts, like parts integration, parts therapy?
A little bit.
Okay, so parts basically is part of internal family systems, but it basically states that we as humans have these parts of ourselves that are playing at all times. So for me, I'll say there's a part of me that is very motivated. She's driven. Like there's a lot of Taurus in me. And so I'm like a go-getter, like nothing's going to get in my way. I think Taurus is like the bull. But then there's a part of me that's like very sensual and soft and expressive. There's a part of me that is very like wild and very like my past was partying and right. So I'll just share those three parts. And every time I tried to make those parts wrong, or I tried, when I was in one part, I was like, but I'm also that and I'm also that. And so I felt like I was always in these fragmented expressions of myself. So you speaking to the theatrics, I wonder if there's a way, again, now that you're not necessarily there, but I'm just thinking like for the industry in itself, to use theatrics in parts work. So you're like, okay, it is a separate part of me, but it's a part of me. And so I'm going to play with that part. I'm going to act out as that part. And I'm going to act out as that part. And then what happens is then you start to create a unison between the parts. And so instead of being a fragmented being, you bring all of these parts back into wholeness. And then that gives you the opportunity to then be able to cathartically express from yourself, just something like that.
No, I love that. And what's interesting is that that activity or that integration I found that through yoga.
Okay.
And my thesis in college was on the integration of performance in yoga and how you can actually deepen the emotional connection to yourself through tremor poses. So I got the opportunity to perform in Bogota, Colombia.
Okay.
My second year in college. A friend of mine wrote a show and we went and performed for the Fitzmaurice Institute, which is a breath work, but not necessarily like breath work as we would know, like holotropic breath work, but more vocal production. So like proper diaphragmatic breath. And the entire philosophy of Fitzmaurice is to deconstruct to reconstruct. So our body innately knows how to breathe properly, but we have all these repressed emotions that prevent us, due to musculature contraction, from breathing in the correct way. And because we don't breathe in the correct way, we're not able to express and release and process. So their approach is through different yogic postures. So think like in yoga, Supta Baddha Konasana, or like...
That's my favorite word to say in yoga.
Reclined butterfly pose. So laying on your back, soles of the feet together, knees wide. If you keep your legs out there and you breathe down into the belly, and you do that for about 5 minutes, and then over 20 breaths, you slowly allow your knees to rise, your legs will shake and tremor. But you have a vocal sigh as on the exhale of every breath. So you take a... And the interesting piece is a lot of people in yoga, and you'll hear this in a lot of classes, they will force the sigh because they think they must make sound. That's not actually them allowing their body to relax. That's them constricting the vocal cords and forcing sound out. So they're doing the opposite of what they're trying to do. And then so what you would do is you'd be focusing on this breath while then also breathing and going straight from that ending state into reciting a monologue, into doing the performative aspect, into rehearsing lines. So you're rehearsing it from a neutral, supple state rather than doing it from this like, oh, I need to become this version of Kevin in order to perform. And similar to a dog that you shared, the example they share is with a lion. So if you watch a lion hunt, every muscle in its body is tense because it needs that power in order to catch the prey. What does a lion do before it eats or before it sleeps? It roars. The roar is an audible sigh, just like humans can do in a similar way, but dissimilar in that animal versus human. But that allows their muscles to actually release before they then consume or before they then go into a restful state.
I love this. And I think exactly what you're speaking to is the idea of somatics, right? It's breath, it's movement, it's getting into your body, it's sound. And then the piece you could add in would be like the touch, which would be like maybe if there's tension or tightness in the body. But I think it also brings me to this idea of our vocal cords and our pelvic floor are the same tissues, just as our larynx and for the feminine would be more so the like vaginal canal. And so it actually gives you, if you think about like root chakra, which is about safety, it's about grounding, it's about presence, the vocal cords actually relax the pelvic floor. So when you use noise to vocal tone, let's say, then it relaxes the pelvic floor, but also that's the connection between the vagus nerve in the body of the nervous system, which is the biggest nerve to bring us out of that fight or flight with the lion hunting and back into safety and connection or safety and presence, to really be in your body in the present moment. And then all, like when you're in fight or flight, right, all of your more, let's say, systems in the body that are not necessary for survival shut down. So that's why when you're stressed and you eat, it's really hard to actually digest the food because your whole digestive system is not open and receptive to be able to receive the food. So I love that you're speaking to that because it's the nervous system, vocals down regulates and brings you back into that safety and connection.
So when you work with someone through somatic therapy, do you have a process to identify where to start or what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. My biggest philosophy is always starting with safety. So I always start with creating safety in the body, which is a process of down regulating the nervous system and allowing the understanding that there's so much jargon out there, right, with the nervous system right now, where if the nervous system, like, let's regulate the nervous system. But what regulating the nervous system is typically like unteaching so much of what's been taught around hustle, grind, stress, go, go, go. So when I facilitate, I need to make sure that your nervous system, you have the tools to be able to regulate. If you come out of regulation through the process of somatics, can you bring yourself back into a regulated state? And there's something called the polyvagal theory that basically was created by Dr. Stephen Porges and is interpreted in the therapy world by Deb Donna. But it teaches this 3-part process of the nervous system. And so how do you go from safety and connection to fight or flight, and then into what we call like dorsivagal. So safety and connection, or ventrivagal, all the way to dorsivagal. Dorsivagal would be like freeze. So how do you bring them back down? So understanding autonomic hierarchy, what basically is how do you go from each stage back down, and then allowing women, because I work with women specifically, to feel safe in their bodies. And if you ask a woman that has not been in this work, or even has done a lot of like mindset work and has done a lot of therapy, 9 times out of 10, what I realize is that women don't feel safe in their bodies. They've never been taught how, especially in a society where it's more about the hustle. Women are taking back this energy of making shit happen and having their own careers, and more in the masculine, the feminist movement. And there's a shift that's happening, but where they've come from is that, especially a lot of women I work with coming from the bodybuilding world. So working with the nervous system, making sure they know how to come back into regulation after they're dysregulated, and then really about safety in the body. How do you feel safe in the body?
What would be the easiest way for woman or male to find a way to get back to that place of feeling safe? Or is there a specific action or practice or routine that anyone could do when they feel the need or the desire to step deeper into feeling more comfortable with themselves?
Yeah, so there's a lot of tools. Let's see. What's coming to me at the top of the mind would be, first and foremost, just a sense of breath. So learning how to down-regulate your body through breath. So I typically say an inhale for the count of 3 in through your nose. So you'll breathe into your diaphragm, count of 4, in for 4, hold for 7, and then exhale slowly for the count of 8. That elongated exhale, so longer exhale than inhale, will help to bring them into the present moment, into their bodies. And then really checking in at the beginning with just like a body scan. Do you understand what's happening in your body? Have you connected to your body? You can then progress that into touch. So bringing in safe touch, understanding your body's boundaries, because a lot of people don't understand their own body boundaries. And
what do you mean by that?
Like where their skin meets the external world. And it's different than like just a workout, because a lot of people that come to me will be like, you know, I'm in my body. I work out every day, but it's a different softening. It's a different opening. It's a different feeling of sensation and touch on the body. So I'll have a lot of my clients like really work with different textures and sensations, utilizing maybe their fingertips or their nails, or grabbing soft blankets and understanding how that feels in the body will create an understanding of like, oh, okay. And then you could work with like the idea of feeling safe through mantra, through tapping, but breath is number 1.
I had a really cool experience myself with breath. And to summarize it as a whole, the teaching I got from it is the depth of your breath is the depth of the experience. And I've realized in my life that things that I've really enjoyed but maybe put me into a fearful state or a more, not necessarily fight or flight, but an on edge state, I've held the breath. And when I hold the breath, I actually don't remember the experience as much, or if at all. And I remember how I felt in it. And throughout this experience was this basically obstacle course where you're up on a super high log and you're walking across. And I'm not fearful of heights, but when I got up there, your body goes into some like instinctual state.
Yes.
And I got halfway across and I was just running across this thing. I was like, get to the other side, go.
Yeah.
And I got to the middle and the instructor was like, pause, look up, take a breath, and then proceed. And I honestly, that was the first moment that I even recognized where I was. And I took a breath, I slowly walked across, and then I got to the other side and I was in a completely different state. than when I had first entered. And I think that breath is so important because it does alter the state that you're in.
Yeah.
And altering the state allows you to not only retain more information, but it allows you to experience what it is that you're doing through a new lens. And if you're habitually only coming to whatever it is that you're doing in life through this heightened sense or this stressful state, you're not actually able to go deeper into the experience. You're only able to experience it as you had before, and then it becomes habitual.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. I love this because there's a couple of things that are coming up. Number one is your breath brings you into sensation. And my biggest thing is that you can only experience sensation in the present moment. So your 5 senses, you can only experience now. Like you can experience touch yesterday or smell tomorrow, but you can only experience touch now. Like when I leave this podcast room, I'll never be able to experience touching this table, right? Maybe if I come back.
You'll remember your experience. You'll remember your memory of the experience, but you're not able to remember the actual sensation.
Exactly. So when you're speaking about like being on the ropes course, I just did a ropes course like last week.
It was epic.
It was so good.
I did it as an annual end of last year as an annual review.
Okay.
And I wanted it to be more cerebral.
Yes.
But I was like, this looks sick. So I have to do this as well. So I showed up a day early so that I could do the ropes course, but then go like technology free and like write and journal for a couple of days. It was awesome.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And so when you can only experience your sensations now, but when you're so breathing up here, right? Like very chest, very anxious, very stressed, very just like maybe even rapid, fearful, you're only experiencing your logic, right? So the breath brings you into your body, which is where you then experience the sensations. And I can think about it too, where I've been dating this man now for like a few dates, and when I'm in my head, it's like I almost don't remember even what he looks like, what he feels like being around him. And there's been like four dates, 4 experiences, and it's every other one. One of them, the first one, I was super in my body. It was Sunday. I walked there. It was really slow. I like paid attention to the sunshine on my skin, and it was like one of the best dates that we've had, or that I've had. That was our first date. And then the next one, it was more on a weekday. I was working. I was like the end of the evening, getting ready, going quick. And I was more logically in my head judging him about like the words he would say, the tone of his voice, like just the energy was so heady because I was breathing in my chest because I just came from being more like in the masculine and working. And then the third date, I was like, oh, I got what happened. So then I worked on like getting back into my body, and we were so connected. And after that, I could remember like his face, and I could remember how he felt, and we were super connected because he was in his masculine, I was in my feminine. And then the fourth date was something transpired prior, and I was more in my head, and there ended up being friction in that date because I wasn't in my body. And I wasn't connected to the senses. I wasn't connected to my breath. So like you can completely alter an experience, an opportunity, time with a person by where you are actually leading from.
Were you able to recognize that in the moment, or was that in reflection?
In the moment, by the fourth day, I could recognize it. But it was really, by that time, it was like, it was hard for me to shift in the middle of the experience. So there was one point where I had to like run out somewhere and like go to the bathroom, grab something. And I was like, okay, breathe. In the bathroom, I was just like, shake, get back into the body.
Do you have a process, or what does the process look like for you moving or shifting from the head to the heart, or from the mind to the body?
Yeah.
Because, and maybe speak, if you could, a little bit on shifting from this masculine work-centric, I own a business world into now I'm leaving that archetype. I'm leaving that world to now step into a more relational, emotionally driven, empathetic world?
Yeah, that's a great question. For my process, it's always some sort of move, breathe, and connect. So move, breathe, meditate, move, breathe, connect. So when I am in a very heady space or work-oriented space, it's typically some sort of like dance. Maybe it's stretching. Maybe it's going for a run if there's enough time. Or maybe it's just simply like shaking. And so when I get that, that's basically moving all the energy through the body. And then breathing, it depends on what breath. It depends on if I want to be more soft, if I want to be more open. I will do some sort of breath technique. And that is to get from the head into the body or from the head into the heart. And then I'll be able to open my body's capacity, because what happens when I'm in the masculine is there's more constriction that's happening for me specifically. And there's more constriction, so I need to open in order to then be in the feminine to receive or be the magnet of what I'm desiring. And then the connection would be either meditation. Sometimes it's like sensual body oiling. Like if I'm getting ready for a date, let's say, I will like use some oil and just connect to my body. Maybe there's some singing that happens. But it's really now an intentional process. I used to just go from work to the date or from work to the connection. And I notice how big of a shift it creates, not only for me in the experience, but for the masculine on the other side, or for the person that I'm going to be connecting with on the other side.
So does that look like an end of work kind of power off routine that you go through when you come home? Or is that something that you are consciously thinking about as you're wrapping up your day?
I would say I'm very like intuitive for what's transpiring. So it's not like, okay, now that you're saying it, I'm like, maybe that's a good idea, but I don't have something that's like so
as we talked a little bit before, my brain thinks in systems.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, day's done at 5:30, and then we have a 15-minute kind of like power off routine.
Yeah, see, this is the masculine and the feminine. Like, I just do it as I need it to be. And you're structure.
I talked to a friend of mine who had a very similar experience, and his entire thing was creating essentially a power down routine, just like if you were to turn off your computer. You have like the do-do-do-do-do, and it shuts off. He has the exact same thing for him leaving. And he has a power off routine for when he leaves work and he steps into with his fiance now.
Yeah.
And so I don't know the specifics of it, but he basically has structured a thing in his office where he goes through the same checklist, kind of like a pilot booting up a plane. He does it for a power down. And he goes, now when I do that, it's almost as if my body knows that it's time to leave that energy behind and step into this new energy. And the only quote I have in the office here is
so small, by the way.
Time holds memory, space holds energy.
Yeah, okay.
And the way that I perceive that in this scenario is that he has not only the energy and the space, but the time that he spends powering down, essentially. And if there is a shared or held energy in that experience, the body's going to keep the score and remember that so that when he does it again, he's able to then continually condition his body to go to where he wants it to go rather than something that's reactionary.
Ooh, okay. So what is, from my lens, it's like the feminines, or as a feminine, we're in the masculine energy, or the doing, the logic, the structure, the leading. And so I could see how that would benefit the feminine, right? Like leaving the more structured, logical stuff behind, because if you're going to be in, let's say, a partnership with the masculine, you can't bring your masculine energy into his masculine energy, or else if you think about a magnet, like if you're not even familiar with masculine and feminine energy, listen to this. Two magnets coming together, if you've ever tried to put like magnets together and they repel each other, right? It's because you need to have a north pole and a south pole to create magnetism. So you need the masculine and the feminine to create magnetism. So for a boss babe or a, businesswoman, if she comes in with her masculine to her partner who's masculine, there's going to be like repelling energy. So what would something like that system for your friend, what is his desire to do that? Or like how does that create, or what does that create in the dynamic with his fiance?
So I think I see where your head's at with it too. And I see you viewing it from work is only masculine, and then doing this shifts into only feminine. And I think from my point of view and my perspective of it is you have both in every situation. The degree to which you have shifts. There are days where I'll work, and I think he's very similar to me, and he's a very system-oriented guy who runs a business too. And I would say, let's just spitball with numbers, but it's like 95% masculine, 5% feminine, or 100 and 0. And so his power down is his innate state as a man is masculine.
Yeah.
So he's allowing more feminine energy to come in so that he can connect with his fiance.
Okay.
Because if there's 0 feminine energy, there's 0 connection.
Yes.
And on the inverse, maybe she has to power down more because she needs to get to a place where it's 80-20 feminine male. And maybe he just needs to do a quick like, okay, cool, I need 5 minutes to just like dust off, and then I'm good, because I don't need so much feminine energy to connect. And as I'm thinking through this, it's a very interesting thing with them specifically, because he's like, yeah, it takes me 5-10 minutes, and then like I'm good to go for dinner.
Yeah.
And he's like, his fiance, it's like 30-45 minutes.
Yeah.
She's got to go for a walk, got to get outside, take some breaths. Like, it's a much, much more significant power down process for her. And that might be the reason, is because she needs to cultivate more feminine energy and get that to the baseline. So it may actually be easier for the masculine than it is the feminine.
Yeah, I would say it takes me like my innate, I guess, design. I grew up with a mom who was an accountant. Her whole idea was like, we're strong, independent women. We don't need any men, right? Which has been unwinding and undoing. I came from bodybuilding. I was in the corporate world. Now I own my own business. And so I've been conditioned to be more in the masculine. So it takes me, so I can get stuck there, which I don't, but it takes me a little more intentionality. And over the years, it's been less and less and less of being so intentional about it. That's why now I can flow. But yeah, I would say there's a journey to go on out of the masculine back into my body.
So this might be a great segue into intimacy then. How should, I think men and women view intimacy differently. And I'd be curious to explore both perspectives of it as we dive deeper here. But how, obviously, there needs to be these almost opposing forces for an intimate connection to happen. But how do you, with your clients or from a women's point of view intimacy? And then maybe let's double click on the masculine side and see how they contrast and compare. Taking a quick break from this episode to remind you that your inputs matter. This show was designed and created to help you build a high-performing, healthy, wealthy life. So if you feel that you're getting value from this episode, please go ahead and share it with someone that you feel would get value as well. Now, fun fact, 90% of listeners of this show are not actually subscribed to the podcast. So if you would take a moment and go ahead and tap the subscribe button, it would mean the world to me. Thank you so much for being here. Now back to the show.
Yeah, I love this. And I think it's so good. My audience is going to be like, yes, I want to hear it from the male's perspective. They're like, we heard your perspective already. So intimacy for me is into me I see, which is obviously a pretty used phrase. But I love that because what I teach my clients is in order to cultivate the most pure, healed, whole, intimate connection with someone, you must learn how to explore that within yourself first. And so where I start my women is the intimate connection or the self-intimacy that they have with themselves. Are they able to, again, be safe in their bodies? Are they able to be in the feminine, to, if they're desiring the masculine forward? Because I believe the same thing, right? Masculine and feminine energy in both. And then for intimacy, as you deepen with yourself, it's how do you touch yourself, feel yourself, breathe with yourself, see yourself, connect with yourself? Because a lot of what I see is this nitpicking of the partner, but really, as we know, everything is just a mirror back to what we nitpick within ourselves. And so when I'm telling you the story about the second date where I'm looking at him and I'm like, you're breathing the wrong way, it's because I have a tendency to look at myself and to be like, you're not perfect. We need to really create perfection. And that's something that I've been working through many years. And that's why I'm so aware of it and I can switch it. But intimacy is really being without those heady judgment and projections and nitpicking of the partner, and really being inside of your body, for the feminine at least, to receive, how does he feel? How does your body respond? Like, how are you in the present moment with the person? And instead of looking at the lens of, oh my gosh, he breathed the wrong way, or he laughed really immaturely, right? These are the things that go through my mind. I'm a tough critic, guys. Then from that perspective, can you look at him and be like, wow, like you have gorgeous eyes, or the way your shoulders are sitting, right? Or, the intelligence that's coming out of you, it's shifting. How are you being an energy exchange with the person that you are cultivating intimacy with? And then we can talk in terms of progression as that goes on. But like, that's kind of the first experience.
Yeah. And that also brought up a thought that within every criticism is an ask. And that then relates back to the mirror perspective or belief, is that I think anytime that I've caught myself criticizing someone else or judging someone else, whether it's verbal or subconscious, or verbal or unspoken, I can almost not immediately, but I can almost flip that around to see what is it in myself that I am not or don't want to shine light on. Because I view this in them, but really it's the thing that I don't like in myself that I'm criticizing in them because it's what I see in me.
In you, yeah.
And from an intimacy perspective, I think the moments that I've felt the most intimately connected to someone, male or female, but we'll take relational, for example, is where I can be in the masculine doing, attempting something where I have the possibility of failure, but being accepted no matter whether it turns out either way. And so it's an acceptance of you'll be okay, whether you succeed or fail, quote unquote fail, but we know that we're going to learn and grow together.
Okay. So is that like a support, like feeling ultimately supported by the feminine?
I'd say it's a support so that I can continue to do what I feel called to, while I know that there is a feminine support system on the other side that is like a safe space to come home to.
Okay. So what is a safe, I like this. What is a safe space for you as the masculine? Like, what does that feel like, or what does that look like, sound like, or how would you explain that when you're feeling like, this is a really safe space? I love it. If we could come back to a space and you're like, I love it here, what would that be for you?
The first thing that comes to mind is a non-judgmental place. So I've caught myself where I've been pursuing something and I've judged myself on the way that I've done the thing or the outcome that I've gotten. And I realized that I come back and with the woman I'm seeing right now, where I've shared something and it's like, it's not even a blink where it's just, oh, that's cool. Well, we could try this or do this, or like, awesome. Well, what about this? And there's no like additional judgment. And in my mind, I'm like, wait a second, that doesn't matter to you?
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this thing and ruminating on it all day long. But when I share it and it's received with such openness and non-judgmentalness, that then gives me the desire to want to share more. And then the more that I share, the more open I feel. And the more open I feel, the safer I feel in that relationship. Okay. And the safer I feel in that relationship, the more intimate I want to be with that person as well.
Yes. So how does judgment feel receiving on your end? So can you tell if, like, say I was sitting in front of you with my you laughed the wrong way. Could you energetically feel that, or is it more so through spoken that you feel more judgment?
I think I'm pretty intuitive and very empathetic as well. I feel it. I think most people can feel it, but I think that has been turned off for a lot of people or conditioned out of them. And even talking about breath before, it's like coming back to the body, coming back to yourself. I can sense it. And for a bit of my life, I tuned that out.
Okay.
And any time that I felt, for lack of a better way to articulate, those emotions coming up where I didn't feel safe, I resorted to partying. I resorted to drinking. I resorted to doing something that further removed me from the things I was feeling rather than allowing myself to go deeper into them. So as you spoke earlier, what I feared most was actually the path through rather than me trying to close that door and go around.
So are you saying that you feared intimacy?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. So a little bit about my stories. I lost my mom when I was 17 to cancer. And because of that, I guess because of, yes, but I think that was an experience, something that I'm extremely grateful for now, because it gave me this pinpoint in time, this tipping point per se, to allow me to go deeper into myself. I just didn't allow myself to for a long time because I was fearful of what those emotions were.
Yeah.
But because of that, male or female, I would let you into a certain level, but I wouldn't let you past a certain part where I felt comfortable.
Yes.
So it's like Kevin knows so many people, but who actually knows Kevin?
Yes.
Very few people.
Yes.
And it was the people that I knew prior to my mom's passing. So it's like my childhood friends are the ones who I felt most intimately connected with.
Yeah.
What's interesting, and I've only unpacked this really recently, was there were two opposing forces in my childhood. My dad grew up in the 50s and 60s in New York, like Italian New Yorker, very much like on edge with the mob and all this growing up. And he had a saying growing up, always something. So there's always something to look out for. Yeah. And that turned into and translated into never enough. And never enough translated into I'm not enough. And that manifests itself when I played sports. I had an assist. Well, did you score? Or our team won the game, but did you get into the playoffs? And that, you got an A- on this paper. Well, why didn't you get an A+? Yes. And it was always never enough. And then on the inverse side, because my mom passed when I was so young, I never humanized her. So I only viewed her and remembered the memory of her being this perfect woman. And so if I was to allow someone deeper into relation with me, I would have to recognize my mom's own imperfections in order to let someone in.
Wow.
And so by humanizing her and recognizing that, yes, she had a lot of incredible qualities, but she was also human. And maybe because I don't remember those and I don't see those, and I didn't get to see those, that doesn't mean that she didn't have them. Yeah. And so this pedestal that I placed her upon was not actually truthful, but it was my own imagined belief in order to keep myself, quote unquote, protected. And so I had this never enough with striving perfectionism. And it was this recipe for I have to do everything myself. Yep. Nothing's ever going to be right. I can't let anyone in. And I need to control all of these situations and outcomes, because without that, I wouldn't feel safe within my own body.
Yeah. Wow. I love that you unpacked that. And with your mom, I think that that's a huge piece, right? Of if you only saw her as this perfect being, that then put a lot of pressure on you, and then also on probably the person that you were allowing only that far into your life. Would you say that was a piece of it?
Yeah.
So how do you now, let's say it sounds like you're just dating someone. How do you move through places where you find friction of or have you already dissolved those boundaries? Have you already dissolved those protection mechanisms?
I wouldn't say dissolved. My last relationship ended due to a lapse in communication. And going into my present relationship, I in a way vowed that I didn't want a lack of communication to be the reason that things fell apart or conflict got delayed and therefore then multiplied. So very early on, I was super transparent on this is me, here's what I want, here's why I don't want to do this. And I expressed the why, not just the what. And like I said, those things that I judged myself for were received openly, which said, oh shit, why was I even worried about this in the first place? And then that continued and kind of perpetuated the cycle of share, receive on both sides. And then she felt safe enough to share with me. And it was like two circles spinning in opposite directions, but pulling each other together.
Yeah. Oh, so from the masculine perspective, then, as a female, right, being in the space of, like, there's a little bit of a dance when it comes to, like, dating, when it comes to relating, right? From your perspective, is it the leading of the masculine to be the communicating force, I guess you could say, that could open? Or is the feminine the one that gives you the space to do that, if that makes sense? So I'm thinking from my perspective where there's an opening slowly or unraveling slowly that's happening. And for me, I need to feel safe with the masculine to be able to, like, unravel or to open. But from a male's perspective, how do you receive what's safe to open? Or are you just like, I did it within myself, and so I'm going to be transparent and vocalize? Or is there a safety that was established because of her energy? Like, what gives you that experience?
I think that from a masculine perspective, creating and holding space for the feminine to open is what scared me the most, because that opening is unknown, and that can go any which way. And so it was creating a secure enough foundation within myself that allowed me to hold space regardless of outcome. And that then in turn allowed her to feel safe to share and open, because there was no preconceived idea or premeditated judgment or unspoken expectation that leads to resentment, because it's just allowing things to unfold as they're meant to, rather than saying, okay, well, if it's not this way, it's wrong, which she does a phenomenal job of holding two opposing beliefs. Well, you believe this way, I believe this way. Let's explore and why. And I'm not sure I've experienced that with someone to that depth before. And that's, we can see in look in political space right now. We don't have to go down that path, world, but it's if I believe differently than you, I'm right, you're wrong, and because of that, we must fight.
Right, and
that's the root of almost all war.
Yeah,
it's the root of conflict in religion. It's the root of all of these,
of duality and separation that's happening too in our world.
Yeah, and I don't think duality is a bad thing. I think that my friend Sean has a really good saying that is eluding me right now. But it's something along the lines that duality is at minimum 2, or unity is at minimum 2, because you need 2 opposing forces to join to form a singular one.
Okay.
And the way that I interpret that is this: we need these masculine, feminine opposing forces in order to create a individual that is whole.
Yeah.
And for myself, and kind of going back to what you were saying about having these different parts within yourself, is for a long time after I stopped partying, I wanted to push out that side of me as if that never existed.
Yes, same.
And in doing so, it in doing so, I'd never felt whole. I felt that, okay, this is me, but like that didn't exist. And when I allowed myself to accept that, okay, this is me, but this is also me, and I bring these pieces together, it brought this deeper rooted sense of peace within myself, because I was able to see these opposing forces, like partier, guy in the wellness space, like, and then there's all these other pieces that come together.
Yeah.
And the way that I view it is like a bowling ball and a trampoline. You are all the springs. But wherever the ball rolls, you are more that spring than the others at that given time. But life is seasonal.
Yep.
And as the ball rolls around, you get to see and experience more of you in different moments.
I love that. I love that metaphor. Like, it's super visual. And I think that's exactly the piece too, is like when we're speaking about intimacy, I think that the more you embrace all those parts of you, the more that you have space to hold for the expression of all parts of your partner as well. And so if you are in acceptance of the part of you that's the party of the same journey, right? And then the holistic part, and then all these other parts, then you are more accepting, and therefore you're more accepting of all the parts of the partner, which then creates a deeper intimate connection as well. Because I always say that when there is no shame, when you hold no shame, like a woman who has no shame is an unstoppable woman. So a woman that knows all parts of her has no shame, and she's an unstoppable woman because she's not afraid to see those parts, speak about those parts, express those parts, love those parts. Therefore, there's this freeness or liberation within, and then she's able to love more freely as well.
Is that through the lens of needing to share those things freely publicly, or just within herself?
Great question. I think that from my old perspective, it used to be publicly, but I think now the more I've come rooted into me, it's some parts don't need to be shared expressively, but if they came up or they were asked, could you share it? And could you decide with discernment, does it feel like I want to share this? I think like even in the online space, a lot of it's like be vulnerable, and everyone wants you to put every single thing on the table, or in a relationship. And it's like, some of those are for you. Some of that story might be for you, but it's not hiding any of the pieces, I believe. So it's not saying, here's all of me and I have to share everything publicly. But if you were to ask me, hey, I'm really curious about this part of you, would you mind sharing? Yeah, like we can totally have a conversation about it if I feel safe to express it with you. I think is also an intimacy with yourself, that I feel safe with all pieces and I can express all pieces, but do I want to share all pieces? And I think that's a little of what I've learned too, as I've done the work and I've peeled back the layers and I've looked at the shadows and sat with the things I was ashamed of. I always felt like, well, now I need to tell the person that I'm sitting across with my entire story within the first 3 dates or within the first few dates, right? And really what that was like really jarring for the person's nervous system. It's like, I'm not holding anything back, but also the textures and layers and the journey that I've been on, it's going to take a while, maybe our lifetime, for you to unravel, because I'm always learning something new about me. So you're always going to be learning something new about me. And it's not just a conversation 2-5 for you to learn that. And so that's been something big for me, not just like, here's who I am because I've explored, I have nothing to hide. It's like, here's a little bit of who I am. And as we deepen, it will just naturally come out rather than just letting it all hang out.
How important do you feel the past is to new relationship? Because if the connection that you have is rooted on who you've been, you're not actually then creating something new with that individual. You're only saying, here's all the things that have led me here.
Yeah.
Take this. Not, I am me, you are you. Let's create something new together.
Ooh, I love that. I would say I love just knowing people's past. Not like when it comes to an intimate partner, I don't care about, how many people you've been with, or I kind of just like people's past because it helps me understand more of what drives them, more of what makes them passionate, what makes them tick, what, turns them on. And yeah, and I think a big part of my journey and why people are like, how did you get into what you do? The only way I can explain it is through the journey I've been on. But I would say that when you're looking at someone's past as well, it looks like you can create a story about them based off of their past instead of, like you said, experiencing from the moment you are together and on. Something that I've been doing lately is through dating. Like, I don't really care to know your social media profile if we didn't meet that way. I don't care to know, like, give me a breakdown in this moment what you do for work. Like, I want to experience our energy together and how it feels. And you can drop me a subtle thing about what you do for work, but it's been more fun for me to learn you in front of me without having to dig. My friends are like, oh, you started dating this guy. Did you find his profile yet? I'm like, no, I don't really care to unless it's shown that way, because I trust my instincts. I trust my body. I trust myself enough to know that if it feels off, then I can trust that. And that's been way more fun to explore rather than what's your past? Where'd you come from? What do you do? Who are you? So if that answers it in a roundabout way.
It's interesting you say that too, because it was almost 2 months into seeing this woman before we even followed each other on social media.
Yeah.
And everything that we were experiencing and learning about each other was through conversation and through connection rather than through perception. And
quote that one.
That one rolled off the tongue there too.
I was like, wait, I need to go back and listen just so I could quote that.
And I think that's one of the reasons that there was a depth to connection very quickly early on, because we created the space for that to exist. Rather than saying, like, here's you, here's me, how do these fit together? It's, let's actually explore this together.
Yes, because you can get so, well, at least for me, I'll speak personally, can get so caught up in what do they do? What's their status? Who are they? Rather than, like, do we have a connection? Can we enjoy each other in this moment and explore from that place? So yeah, instead of this is how I perceive this person, it also helps me show up more naturally, because I'm like, I don't even know who you are, what you do. And I used to do that when I was a personal trainer. I was training at Equinox in LA, and there was a lot of amazing people that had come through. But for like the first 3-4 months, I never even knew what my clients did, because I just wanted to vibe out with them as a person and give them the workout and just be in relationship with them. And I remember there was one time where I had a client, he's like, I have to go to an audition. And I would just be like, okay, like I have audition. And finally, like 4 months in, I'm like, what do you do? He's like, I'm a comedian. And I'm like, but you're not even that funny. Like, we had developed such a fun relationship without me even knowing what he did, which is, I think, what we need more of, intimacy in life, which you were talking about, I think, maybe before we started this, about how dating has been set up to be recyclable or disposable. You didn't say it in these words, but like dating has not been set up for longevity. Yeah. And I think a lot of that has to do with like the online space and online dating apps and all of that. How do you feel about that?
So how do you approach dating through the lens of the vast majority of people find each other now on apps, where there's actually less opportunity for an intimate connection to be created because of the immediate jump into social media? What would be, I guess, your perspective on how do you meet someone in that setting, but then distance yourself from the social media element until you know that you are actually then connected with them for who they are rather than what they do or who you think they are?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is, let's say this man per se. I was just drawn to, yes, he was great looking. It didn't really say what he did. It was pretty simple. So I think a lot of it is maybe not even like over explaining yourself. Like I used to put like these long responses And now I just put something that's punchy that gives people an idea of like it's, one of them was like, what's your greatest superpower? And I was like, my energy. You can get, like, if you know, you know. And so maybe it's that. I also was just like not willing to dig. I was not willing to try to investigate. I just wanted to be in presence. And so that was, I guess, what I would say for that one is, because I keep wanting to say energy, but I can't project that everyone's in tune, right? I actually got off the app before him and I even started talking because I was like, I don't really want to be on here. It's not really my vibe. I can meet people out all the time. I could be at the grocery store and meet someone. I could be walking down the street and meet someone. Why am I on here? And so, but something was a pull to, I'm like, this guy seems interesting. And his profile was very simple. And I could just feel his energy through the photos. And it was more so, I'm intrigued. So I said, hey, if you're interested in continuing to explore this connection, here's my phone number. We can talk. And then I got off the app. And it was very like no expectations, no attachment kind of thing.
It's a good line too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Quote that one.
Yeah. We got all the quotes. But I think that's also another piece that we can speak to about, like, we forget how actually easy it is to meet people outside of the dating apps. And in a world where it's become so hard to date, that's the very thing that's causing people to have a hard time dating, is the very belief that's transpiring inside, the very thought, the words that they use, like that's the frequency you're putting out. But for me, I'm like, I could meet someone, again, at the grocery store. I'm standing looking for milk and I'm like, hey, do you drink raw milk? And, or like, I also just give an energy of like, people always want to randomly shoot the shit with me because I believe that when I go out into the world. So how can we reignite that? Because even after the whole lockdown, people want in-person interactions. And so it's as simple as one liner or one question that you can start to create a conversation with someone. And where there's the feminine wants to be pursued and energetically penetrated, she also can initiate. And I think that's where a lot of women get challenged. And I can maybe ask from your own perspective from the masculine of approaching, but like, I'll give a smile to a man that I think is attractive or I'm energetically drawn to, or I'll say hello, or I'll make like intense eye contact with them when I'm walking down. I guess I'm at the grocery store a lot, walking down the walking down the aisle of Erewhon or Whole Foods or something. But yeah, it's the woman can initiate, hey, I'm available for you to come talk to me. So I don't know from the masculine perspective, like what gives the masculine, and I know obviously now you're in a dating dynamic, but the like, it's okay to approach me type energy, or when do you feel safe enough or open enough to approach someone being out, or like when did you, I should say?
I'm a fairly open person as is already, and I really like to meet new people.
Yes.
No matter where I am in the world, or what I'm doing, I'm always trying to seek out conversation and seek out new experience and meet people in that. And I think that something that is interesting, and I don't think this is just unique to LA, although it's more prevalent in LA, is that I have a lot of friends who they're friends or acquaintances, but the vast majority of people that they are close friends with was because dating didn't work out with that person. So they go into every situation as if this is a potential partner. And then if that doesn't work out, we can be friends.
Yeah.
I view it inverse.
Okay.
I view everyone as like, would we be good friends?
Yeah.
Or do I respect you enough to do business with you? Or how can we learn and grow together? I view it through that lens, and then that can then progress into something else. So it's almost the inverse.
Yeah.
And I think as you were sharing before, perception creates reality. If your belief is that dating's hard, it will be hard for you. And we shared a little bit on like my view on work, but like everything that I do for work is relational based. And the way that I perceive that is through the lens of consistency. So if you go to the grocery store a lot, so you're very consistent there. But the way that I was able to make the most friends and make the most connections when I first moved to LA was I signed up for 3 groups, like 3 clubs, and I went every single week.
Okay.
So it's like maybe one week we show up and I just say like, hey, hi, whatever it is, like, I hope you had a great day. Cool. We all went to Run Club and like you chat for 5 minutes on a run.
Is this Venice Run Club?
Yeah.
I've been seeing that.
It's epic. We've been going for a couple of years, and
I've been getting my run on recently because I'm like, I will go to Venice Run Club soon.
Come.
Okay.
It's epic. It's a little over. It's a lot of people now.
Yeah.
I
like
started
300 or like.
Oh, it's more. Probably 5, 6.
Wow.
Yeah. I started going when it was 100, and you could actually converse with people.
Yeah.
But needless to say, maybe you go one week and you have a very short dialogue with someone. Then you come back and you're like, oh, how was your mom's this? Or how was this? And then you pick up the conversation.
Yep.
If you do that for a couple weeks or a couple months, you end up getting to the place where now you have some rapport built based on this low-level connection. Then that can stem into an ask for something else. And I think that the problem is that dating is viewed through the lens of immediacy.
Fast. Yeah.
So I get on an app, I match with you, I must meet you tomorrow. And then from that, like, I must sleep with you a week later. And then if after 2 months we're not going to get married, like, fuck, this is probably the wrong thing. And that's why I said modern dating culture feels more like how to get out of relationships and into a new one.
That was it.
Rather than how to deepen the connection in the relationship that you're in. So that you can continually go deeper and deeper and deeper into an intimate connection. 2 completely different ends of the spectrum. And
yes.
Let's real quick pivot to business, because it's the same thing through the lens of relational building. It's something that I recognized in presently we're raising for this expansion down in Costa Rica for the resort. And I realized that I have a very extensive network of people that could potentially invest, but I haven't talked to them in a couple of years. And so when I reach out and I'm like, here's the ask, here's the thing, it like is very transactional feeling.
Yes.
And I'm like, why am I not talking to these people that I'm genuinely interested and want to learn from regularly?
Yeah.
And so I went through and recreated my entire personal backend CRM to automate based on the cadence that I set, whether it's monthly, quarterly, or biannually, to remind me to follow up with that person just to continue the conversation at regular intervals.
Yeah.
So it's like if we're talking once a month, once a quarter for 2 years, and then all of a sudden I have an opportunity that may be interesting for you, or you're like, I want to run a retreat in Costa Rica. It's not just like, hey, we got availability, book.
Yeah.
We've been cultivating this relationship, and you have that consistency element to it, which I was talking last night. I was like, why haven't I done this since I was a child?
Yeah.
Because I've met so many people throughout my life, and how many people do you meet that then fall off?
Yes.
So completely different, but same but different, where one's a relational, but it's through the same lenses. You're building relations within business, you're building relations within friendships, you're building relationships intimately.
Yeah.
Consistency and quality of connection is that throughput that pulls you through.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge, huge, huge piece, which is the fear of intimacy. And I think that what we see now in modern society is so many humans fear intimacy, therefore they rush the process. Because if you think about how much discomfort, let's say in a romantic partnership, you have to sit in some discomfort. You don't, at the beginning, even inside, right? Like you're not with the person 24/7. You're not getting validated all of the time. That I learned through my own dating experience and just observing through the platform that I have around dating is very much people are so quick to rush the intimacy process because there's a fear of the steps that it takes to become really intimate or deepen an intimacy. So for example, with the dating apps, people need to hurry and get from this point to this point to this point because of the discomfort that happens. I don't know where we stand. I don't know if he likes me or she likes me. I don't know. And so they rush the more mundane pieces of, even if you're a deep person, even if we can have conversations like this, right? If we were meeting at Run Club, we wouldn't be like, hey, so what's your childhood trauma, right? Like you said, it's very about, hey, what'd you do this weekend? Because in the human experience, those are pieces of peeling back the layers and a piece of actually developing rapport and building safety inside of the dynamic. And I feel like that doesn't get spoken about enough. At least this is my perspective, because I used to be like, well, I hate the surface level stuff or the lower level conversation or the more surface level conversations. But actually, like, it's a part of the unraveling and unwinding of a person that allows you to deepen, because you're not rushing the intimacy process.
Do you, when meeting someone new, or, excuse me, I think there's like two ends of the spectrum here, and I'd be curious to get the cadence of which you see.
Yeah.
So there's this like surface level, how was your day? What's this? What's that kind of thing? And then there's like the depth of connection that you can get from deeper questions. But if you're only giving deep questions, it's like, fuck, this is a lot.
Yeah.
And if it's only light, you're like, there's not much depth there. How do you view, or is that more of something that you feel into when connecting with someone new?
That's a good question. I would say it depends on the environment. So where did we meet in the first place? If we're meeting at a breathwork journey, then I'm pretty sure it's probably going to be a little bit more deep, maybe, but there will still be like, well, where do you live? What, do you drink coffee, or do you rather go to tea, or do you want to go to the beach, right? Like, there are those pieces, and I'm very much very intuitive, I guess you would say. I don't really like say that, but so I can read the pace of it. But if I'm meeting someone on a dating app, I don't know where you stand or what your experience is. So we'll probably enter from a more surfaced space. And then I maybe will ask more playful, deep questions. Like, I like to play this game called the 3 questions. And you ask, what is your favorite color? What is your favorite animal? And then what's your favorite body of water? And then you can interpret, and there's pieces to it. I guess we could give it away here, but you would ask the questions, they would answer, and then you would interpret it for them. So that's kind of like a little more, it's such a surface level question, but like you can see how deep someone is because you'll say like, okay, give me 3 reasons why. So why is that color your favorite color? Give me 3 reasons why. And then they're like, well, because it's the color of my car. It's the color of blah, or mine is maroon. Well, why do you like maroon? Because it's very bold and rich and luxurious. And it reminds me of the depths that are within myself. And it also reminds me of my sensual expression that people can catch on. Right? Like, so I can go into, and you might be like, oh, okay. So now I'm gauging you have gone deeper within yourself, so we can gauge where we're going to take the conversation. But it started with, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite animal, body of water? So that's something I like to play with too. It's kind of fun.
And then to be able to see how much they flavor the response is able to expand upon what you think and they think.
Yeah. And then you can take basically the favorite color is how you wish to be viewed by the world. The favorite animal is what you find important inside of a relationship dynamic. And then the favorite body of water is how you enjoy and experience intimacy and sex. And then how they explain it, you can like then explain it back. And it's like a really cool opener. But it's good for like friends, for intimate relationships, whatever. But
I like this. I'm gonna have to pull this one out this weekend.
I like try it on your lady that you're dating too. Also, it's cool in a group. Like if you have, I think you're having a dinner party thing later. Yeah. It's kind of fun because people like get
all men.
But it's still. I swear, I did it at some sort of experience. It was me and my friend. Everyone else were men, and they loved it. They're like, "Wait, tell me what it means."
Yeah,
it was so fun.
Double clicking on that, and that will kind of, as we begin to wrap up here towards the end. men wanting to know what it means. Curiously, what is something that men don't know about women that they should?
Something that men don't know about women, but they should. We're multi-layered and textured. There's so much happening at all times. I would say that we conversate with our friends a lot about things, but on a more probably deeper perspective, we desire to feel safe inside of a relationship, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a dating dynamic. We want to know that it's safe for us to ask questions. It's safe for us to ask for what we want, to be listened to, that we're safe in how we express and we're heard. That there's a level of safety that is deeply desired when it comes to men, especially because there are a lot of women who do not or have not felt safe with men. So if you can create an environment of safety, like where you're consistent, you're maybe communicative, you're, on time, whatever it may be, that the safety and the consistency are really deeply desired if you want to open us up to all the parts of us, right? Like the wildness, the expressiveness, the playfulness. At least I'm speaking from my perspective and what my clients have portrayed. Yeah.
And in line with the name of the podcast, what is the single input that someone can do or focus on to help them deepen intimacy within a relationship?
Okay. Before I answer that, can you answer what that the feminine doesn't know about the masculine that they should know?
The first thing that comes to mind is that there is the depth to which a woman wants comes from accepting the softness within the masculine and not from the depth of connection, and the intimate connection doesn't come from this brash, must do, achieve, conquer energy. And it comes from a softer, more supple, connective energy.
Okay. And then last piece, and I'll go into that one, is how does a woman access that or like receive that?
It's very similar to the answer you gave too. It's like a safe space, but comes from a non-judgmental acceptance.
Okay.
Where I was told that when I was kind of explaining the two pieces between my dad and my mom and chasing perfection, I came across, or someone shared with me, where if you're only loved for the things that you do, the love will never hit your heart. Because you're loved for something that's outside of yourself, not for who you are. And so in a similar vein, the ability to be appreciated and accepted for you as an individual, not as the accomplishments that you've done, actually allows you to feel that love. And then that love allows you to connect in a more intimate way and in a more open way.
Love that. They're just sitting and appreciating what's in front of you, not trying to change it and judge it. I'm taking notes for myself too. Thank you. And then what was the
single biggest input that someone can focus on to deepen intimacy in a relationship?
Themselves, first and foremost. So more time spent in solitude with self is going to help with allowing their own shields and protections and layers to drop. And I would ultimately say, if you want to do one activity or one thing that you can do, I'm really big on mirror work. So sitting in front of the mirror and giving yourself the ability to speak freely about the judgments you have about yourself, the pressure you put on yourself, the ways in which you criticize, pick yourself apart. And then ultimately, after that's been expressed, can you sit with your breath, create that safety, and then decide how you're going to choose to meet those parts of you instead? So like if there's like the self-criticism and the protector, can you meet each of those parts and then come back to safety regulation and then decide to love them compassionately or love them with openness, acceptance. And when I say them, that's the parts of you. Therefore, that will then allow you to accept yourself, which then, as you already spoke to, everything outside of you is a mirror. So you're not going to be as judgmental to the person sitting across from you, which then can help you deepen in intimacy. Would be my perspective there. And for the woman, I like also to give like a breast massage to open the heart, to be able to take those protective layers down and soften.